This is a pheasant tail nymph. It's tied on one hook size larger than we're going to do. This has two things on it. I'll give you a little different looks at it here. This has wings on it. We're going to do a second and a third pattern with wings. One with wings and one with legs that are made out of hackle. This one has pheasant tail fibers for the wings, pheasant tail fibers on the tail. The abdomen and the thorax is peacock herl, and I can't tell you on this one whether I use pheasant tail for the shell back. I really prefer to use turkey tail because it's a little bit darker. And again, this has a bead, and for our first night of pheasant tail nymphs, we won't be using beads. Now, the objectives for tonight, the proportions. This fly has three distinct parts. It has a tail, an abdomen, and a thorax. The entire construction is made out of feathers. This has a ribbing. I can't tell you if this one is gold or copper. The original pattern calls for copper. An acquaintance in Pennsylvania has me tying them all with gold, and that's Mr. Joe Humphrey. The size that we'll use is called brassy. For the size 14 fly we will tie, we're using size brassy. Now the difference between brassy and medium, brassy is 1/2 a thousandth of an inch smaller. So either or. And there's probably not many people in this room that know what 1/2 a thousandth is anyway. So we won't go into that. Another thing we're going to do tonight, and that's when we wrap the rib. We've preached and preached and preached, you always wrap away from yourself. But we're going to wrap these ribs. It's called counter wrapping. Pheasant tail is probably one of the single most fragile materials you can work with. So when we counter wrap, we actually go over the wraps that we have done going away from us, and it strengthens them. It gives the wire more visibility, and if we're using a soft body material, it actually gives you very pronounced body segments. This fly, of course, has a thorax, which is what we use the peacock herl for. And I don't know if you can see that, but it's got a shell back or a wing casing down it. Obviously, to me, that doesn't look wide enough. I don't know why I did that, but I did. I was probably tying too many of them. Pheasant tail nymphs come in sizes and colors. I have a fly box up here. I did bring the wrong one. Most everything in here is soft hackle, but whether they be soft hackle or this style, I tie them in 4 colors: natural, black, olive, and Leonard got us tying them in yellow last year. And for the steelhead, I did get a couple of fish on it. I didn't get the feather till later in the season, and I think the yellow would be better up from September into early October because it mimics the golden stonefly quite well. Questions so far? Again, all the major portions of the fly are constructed out of feather. How to fish this fly. Number 1, don't leave home without pheasant tail nymphs. Why didn't I turn on the light? Don't leave home without pheasant tail nymphs. Sizes, colors, and shapes. I think it's the most versatile general nymph that you can tie. And I'll show you something after we've tied the first 3, and I'll show you something that we use in north central Pennsylvania, and it's a killer. It really is, and it will be kind of a bonus to you. This fly can be dead drifted under a strike indicator. This one has a small bit of weight, as it shows with the bead. It can be drifted in the upper part of the water. They call that the film, without weight. I like them as an anchor fly. Somebody's got to leave me some pheasant tail. Oh, I'm going to show them how to stack them. Then we can hand it out.
I'll give a piece of
It's a versatile nymph. Joe Humphrey says it's the most versatile nymph that you can tie and fish. And whatever you want to do to it is all right. You want to change your wire color to chartreuse, you want to change it to red, you want to use, per se, black tying thread or yellow tying thread to put the rib on it, go ahead and do it. Once you've got that hook in the vise, the only thing that's going to hold you back is your imagination. Never forget that. Don't be afraid to tie flies, and always tie 3 of them. Yes, Al?
What sizes, Bill?
I tie pheasant tail nymphs. This is a 12, and I'll use something like this for early season steelhead. Maybe inland trout if the water's moving pretty good. But I tie them right down to 18s. Now, the smaller the fly, the less detail you have to show. The bigger the fly, the more detail and precise. Okay, what we want to get through today, and this fly is not a real great representation of it, but it's, how does that look for looking at the fly by the side? Okay, we're looking for about a 60-40 with no bead, 60% on the thorax, the abdomen, and about 40% of the fly on the thorax. Now, because this has a bead, if you'll notice, it's about 50-50. And that's about right with a bead. Now, you could have gone to this is probably a 2X hook. You maybe could have gone a little longer hook and got to 60-40. But we're going to do something when we start our fly with the thread base. Remember who I spoke? Night 1, it grips the material, and if we're trying to give a fly a tapered shape, or we're using a thin material, your abdomen won't be look quite proportioned. You can build up underneath with the thread. I'm going to show you that very soon. And another thing, I brought all the pheasant feathers that I had. I put all my bird dogs to sleep several years ago, so we're running out of pheasant feathers. I'm going to have to start buying them. But I'm going to show you how to stack a feather, and this is important for the tail. And I'm going to show you another trick on the tail that Ron Zernowski taught me, which really enhances the look of a pheasant tail nymph. Now, I'll put a hook in the vise and start. Does anyone have any questions before we get going?
What's the size of the hook we have now?
You have a 14. And that's not classified a small hook. I fish a lot of size 14 flies, dry flies, steelhead flies, inland trout flies. Again, changing the shape of the style of the hook changes its shape can mean an awful lot, and I'll show you one of those a little later.
You said dead drifted in the film if you don't have any weight on. So what's the other option?
Dead drifted under an indicator.
Yeah.
And you can dead drift it in the film. If the fly sinks on its own or goes up and down, that's a good sign.
Or if you're not dead drifting it in the film, where else are you fishing?
Well, you may be able to swing them, but that's probably not your greatest option. And the words dead drift are the two most misunderstood words in fly fishing. I have to show you that. I can't. You have to see it to believe it. And you may be out fishing and move 25 feet and everything changes. that's fishing. You have to be able to adapt every time you move. Any other questions? Now I'm going to use a colored thread for this fly that I like. I would have brought brown, but I've got a spool of brown thread that is less than acceptable. It's really kind of shitty. It's got a flaw in it, and even with light pressure it breaks. But Nick Panessa got me tying pheasant tail nymphs and hare's ear nymphs with this rusty brown. And he says it gives the fly a little life, and I have to agree with him. Alright, can everybody see that? Again, I cannot see the screen. Again, I'm going to start the thread up at the front. I'm going to leave that sacred space for finishing the fly. Now I'm going to take this thread back just a little bit farther. I'm virtually lined up, if I can see it. Well, it's pretty much between the point and the barb, so I'm going to put a hump of thread in the back here, just a little hill. I'm going to try to hold it to the back, about right over the top of the barb. Now I've brought my thread to the eye side of that. Does that show up on the camera? Does it? Okay, that little bump. What that bump is going to do, when we tie our tailing material on, when we pull down the thread, we're going to pull it down on the eye side of that bump. And it does two things if we're lucky. It kicks the tail up and it makes it flare. And it really looks good in the water, gives it a little bit more movement. And movement, that is, I try to make sure that in all cases of flies that I tie, there's movement. Now, because I'm going to build up a larger body, I'm going to tie my ribbing wire on next. And I'm going to show you a procedure tonight that I haven't tried, that I asked truly a master fly tyer from Pennsylvania about, and I'm going to try it tonight on the camera, and we'll see if it works. I'm going to try to tie this wire as we look at the hook on the far side, so that I don't get a big excuse me, build up of material in one place. Sometimes this is easy, sometimes it's an absolute pain in the can. Yeah, I'm going to take that back. And again, I'm going to stop in front of that bar, my hump. I'm going to go back to the front of my thread base, and I'm going to increase the thread thickness up front. And as I add a little thread, I taper back just a little bit. I'm trying to give my body a little bit of shape, and you can see it. I'm not going to make it as heavy as my finger or as big around as a pencil. Do we see that? Questions so far? All right, on the pheasant feather, these are not center tail feathers. They are all off cockbirds. I used to run a game preserve, so I had access and probably shot 100, 200 pheasants a year over my bird dogs. What I want to show you is this process is called stacking a feather. Now, the side of the feather we're going to use is the side that's got mahogany on it. There's a dull side. I do use that for certain flies if I want to tone them down. But the side that's got the darker black and then the tips go out into this mahogany color, that's what we want to use for this fly. Now somebody's got a couple of feathers that not only is it mahogany out there, but it's got a little bit of blue in it. And that's an exceptional feather. So whoever has those, you are lucky. What we like to do is, because we can't take, like we can hair, and put the material in a stacker, tap the stacker on the table, and pull it out that all the hairs are relatively lined up even. I can't do that on a feather, because as we see, working from the bottom of the whole feather to the top, everything's tapered. So what we do, and we want to use about 7, 8 barbels, and you can count them if you want to. I used to at one time, but now I just guess them by galleon. Pull the barbs that you're going to use. Can you see this? Okay. We're pulling the barbs of the feather out from the center, the shaft of the feather, and we're holding them at 90 degrees. And we're stroking those barbs with our fingers. That is lining the tips up square as best I can. Now I hold that feather with my left hand and I push it away with my right. I never let, now I can't let go of this. There is my tail and my abdomen. Now this feather, you'll see it has a slight upturn. I'm going to use that upturn, hopefully to my advantage. I'm going to shorten that tail up to about right there.
About how long, Bill?
About the gap of the hook. I'm going to get a couple of soft wraps on it. I'm going to make sure she's on top. Now again, I'm tying on the eye side. A couple of good wraps on it. I'm going to pick the feather up and I'm going to put one under it. Can you see the tail, how it's standing up? How it's splaying up from the shank of the hook. Can you see that on that screen? Okay. You can look at it this way, and it's fanned out. So it's movement. The tail material has moved 2 ways. Does everybody see that? Another thing about using this rusty brown thread, it does give the fly just a little bit of life by a change of a color. There's 2 thoughts on the color of the thread. Some people say it doesn't matter. Some people say it does. I have a tendency, I use the thread, either try to hide it by getting a very close color to the materials I'm working with, or I use it as somewhat of an enhancement of a color. And the third way would be to use a very bright thread as a hot spot. And I use a lot of hot spots on woolly boogers right behind the bead, or if there's no bead, that's how I finish the fly. So that's up to you. Sucker spawn, when we get into that on week 7, I like to hide the thread, so I either use white, which is absolutely neutral, or if I'm tying in the pink shades, I use pink. If I tie blue, I actually use a gray thread. Yes, blue sucker spawn works very well on certain days for brown trout at Oak Orchard. Okay, are we ready to move on?
Yes, sir.
Okay, we're going to take and wrap our pheasant tail. Now, this again, I'm going to wrap the pheasant tail away from me. You can do this with your fingers if they're small and agile. My fat, stiff sausages, I do use a hackle plier, this type that you can get in Radio Shack, or you can buy them out of a fly catalog. Now, I do not twist the pheasant tail fibers. I try to wrap them. Once I hook them, I wrap them, and you see these lovely little spikes come up in the body, and you get a lot of texture. There is a pheasant tail nymph that I do tie that you do twist the pheasant tail around the thread and wrap it all the way up to the bead, and all it has is pheasant tail wire and a small hackle. It's another Pennsylvania pattern that really worked well at the Upper Cattaraugus 2 years ago. Now, pheasant tail is fragile. I got to get my thread up out of my way. Now, you have to be careful. You have to clear the hook point. You have to be careful, and I'm going to take this as far forward as it will let me go. And I will probably get that wrap right there. I'm going to throw my thread over 1 time, 2 times, 3 times. Remember, it's fragile. Little pull, 1 out in front of it. I need a smaller pair of scissors. I guess I didn't bring any. I'm going to just make sure that pheasant tail is tied down. Now, it's terribly difficult, but if you notice how the body got just a little bit wider by tying the wire down the side. If you tied the wire on the top, your fly would get a little taller. Again, completely up to you. Okay, we all there? All right, I'm going to take my wire. Now I've advanced my thread forward. I can always bring my thread back. Now, I'm starting my wire. I'm going to make sure that I get about 3 turns of wire in the body, and I'm going to bring that forward, and I'm going to cut it off so that it's right under the thorax, so I've got a nice even line. Again, 3 times over the wire. Now, this is important because you counter wrap the wire. When you go to tie the wire off, it's not too bad with wire, but if you're using a soft material like French oval tinsel, when you tie forward against something that's been counter tied, you have the tendency to untie it. So you got to make sure that you don't lose the grip of the material you're putting on. And I'm going to cut my wire off as close as I can. I'm going to make sure with my thumbnail that that's turned down. I still look pretty good. I like the tail. I like the abdomen. Questions so far? Now I will pass this feather around because I'm going to have you put on a turkey. We'll use turkey, or you can use the pheasant tail that we used for the tail and the abdomen. Wasn't wide enough to tie a wing casing. You could tie on another piece of pheasant tail if you wanted it, which you could also roll back for what looks like a wing or the legs. All right. Okay. The gap of the hook is the width that we make the wing casing. I thought I had packed a pair of small Starrett dividers. That's what I use at home. So we'll go back to doing it the old-fashioned way. And that's take a hook of your equal size, lay it on the feather, wiggle it out like that, pull her down. Now, I don't want you to stack this. I'm just going to cut it off. Can you see that? Now, we'll pass this around, and we may have to go to pheasant tail wing casings after that. Now, the part of the feather that is the most flexible is the tip of it. Some of these feathers have been treated. I don't know if this one is, with the cheapest ladies hairspray that you can buy, Aquanet Extra Hold. I understand there's not a woman in the world that would use it. I don't know why they still sell it, but that is a great material for spraying the back of feathers that you're going to use for wing cases. You want to have one pheasant tail sprayed with it. You want to have one pheasant tail that isn't sprayed to it, because you want your tail to splay and turn up, and you don't want it in the thorax of your fly. So I normally have one that's sprayed and one that isn't. Question so far. Again, we want to use this part of the feather, this part back here. You probably could get 2, maybe 3 feather or flies out of this. Turkey's a little more forgiving than pheasant tail. I'm going to take and I'm going to square this up. Now, if we look at the feather, one side is dull, one side is shiny, one side actually looks better than the other. See this side right here? That would have been the top of the feather, the weather side of the feather. So I'm going to tie this on face down, because I'm going to turn the feather over my work. And I'm just going to go out here, right up to my sweet spot there. Shorten this bobbin up, stupid. I'm going to hold my material in place, if I can. This weather ain't great for arthritis, gentlemen. I'm going to get a couple of soft wraps on it, I think. There we go. There we go. Make a couple of soft wraps. Make sure that she's running down the hook pretty nice and straight. Now, I'm going to tie this back till I get about that. Can you see that where the thread is? I've got 3 full ribs showing, and I'm going to stop right there. The next thing I'm going to do is take 3 peacock curl. Now, one end of them possibly could be white. That was the end that was onto the center shaft of the peacock's tail feather. By the way, you don't kill the peacock. You don't kill the bird to get these. They drop these every fall. And the earlier a peacock drops his tail feathers, the worst winter you're going to have, and that has been proven. They dropped them the end of August, the year we had the 7 feet in my neighborhood. Now, we're using 3. You could use 4. I kind of like it to be 3. Now, I've got the white ends in my hand because I'm not going to use that end. Okay. I'm going to use 3 pieces of peacock curl, and I'll show you on the camera here. You can see how 2 of them have the white ends. That's the end that attached to the center stem of the feather. Now, I take my herl, I get it in my material hand, which for all of us but one is our left hand, and this man his is the right. And I'm going to square those ends up. Now this is the part of the end that is farthest out on the feather. And I'm going to take and I'm going to tie them in right up behind my sweet spot. And I'm going to come all the way back right. Can you see where I've come back to? I've come back to the starting point right in front of the wing case. I have no gap. Right, now, if this does, don't do this until I can see if it works. When we use multiple strands of peacock herl and you're wrapping them, I'm going to say that 90% of the time, one of them wants to lag behind, or more than likely, one of them wants to go ahead of itself. And I, just out of shits and giggles, we were eating lunch, and I said to Tom, how do you stop that? And he says, once you've tied your peacock herl on, bring your thread back to where you're going to start your herl, start wrapping. He says, pull a little thread out, so it's got a little swing, start wrapping your herl right against your thread. That'll keep them jammed up. I haven't done it yet. You're going to witness either the success or the failure. And so far, I'd have to say he's absolutely
Well, it
correct.
does work. Where's your thread?
It's being pulled.
It's being pushed ahead
By the peacock herl.
by the peacock herl.
Every time you bring it around, you're moving it, you're grabbing.
Now I'm throwing that over 3 times,
Basically dragging it on the bottom.
and I'd have to say that Mr. Tommy Herr is absolutely correct.
Yeah, it works.
3 times over.
That's what I do.
Is that? Why didn't you tell me that? I share with you.
I figured you'd do it.
No, I didn't. Okay, I'm going to cut my herl off. Now, with great care, there's another way of wrapping, 2 other ways of wrapping peacock herl. One, you can take and twist it around your tying thread 3 times and hold the thread and the herl in your hand and palmer it forward. Or you can palmer them one at a time. Palmering one at a time is a pain in the derriere.
Good for chenille, too.
Now I'm going to pull the wing case over the top of the thorax. I'm going to pinch it with my fingers, and I'm going to take about 2 or 3 soft wraps there to make sure that I'm somewhat mostly on the top, and I think it looks pretty good. Now, I can cut that off, or there's other people that take this and fold it back, just like that. Now they finish it, clamping it all under the thread. And I'll do this one that way so that you can see it. Again, I've pinched the turkey tail down. I've rolled it back towards the back of the hook, pinched it down again. I'm going to use 2 4-turn knots if I've got room. This is just another look. This could have been cut off before the fly was finished. Now, take your scissors, keep them square, and you get just a little bit of fuzzy turn up. If the feather's real good and sticky, I got something there. What is it? It's a piece of thread. You get a couple little sticky spikies up there. If the feather lays back real well, It looks like a layer on a body of, particularly a stonefly. My thorax is a little bit too big.